نبدأ هذا النقاش يعني المنتظر، المقابلة يعني بين الجيل الشباب وما أيضا التأثير العالمي لنادين لبكي وجيهان نجيم، التو كابلز جيهان نجيم وكريم عامر ونادين لبكي وخالد مزنر. مشرف الجلسة سفير المملكة المتحدة السابق في لبنان توم فلتشر.
We've given you a particular treat of having these four extraordinary, talented individuals to talk to for the next 40 minutes or so. Not just talismanic examples of creativity and of fantastic filmmaking, fantastic artistry, fantastic musical ability, but also four people who are exploring the boundaries between art and politics, and are at that intersection where I think a huge amount of power is in the Middle East at the moment. They're also, as Waleed's presence demonstrates, exploring how to push those boundaries, how to develop in their fields while also being parents and couples. And one of the things we're going to look at today is how they work together in these partnerships to create even more extraordinary films, even more extraordinary music, and even more extraordinary change in the Middle East. So, that's the plan. Just to introduce myself, I'm a recovering ambassador, a former ambassador. I survived 4 years in Lebanon. I'm an excellency. But one of the things I'm doing at the moment is exploring and writing about the future of power. And so I'm very interested in these intersections, these crossovers between different disciplines, where I think you find the most interesting sources of new power. And one of those is between art and politics. I found in my time in Lebanon, increasingly, that to do diplomacy well, you also had to understand communications, and you had to understand visuals. Anyone who saw that extraordinary photo and was moved by that extraordinary photo of Aylan Kurdi washed up on the beach in Turkey, anyone who's seen the way that Daesh are using visuals now to spread their own message knows how powerful this form, this medium can be. And so it struck me very clearly that this was an area where diplomats and politics had to understand the world around them to a greater degree. And so, in a way, I'm moving from diplomacy and politics into communication, just as our four extraordinary panelists are moving in different ways from the world of art and visuals into the political space. What I'd like to do, Jehane, is start with you and just get a sense of what you're working on now. What's inspiring you? Where are you in that journey between art and politics?
Well, I think, first of all, we in the Arab region have a very rich history of storytelling. We are great storytellers, yet somehow we're in a point in time when our story, our Arab story, is in turmoil. So I think what is inspiring me right now is to be able to try to humanize our part of the world to the rest of the world. And that comes from telling entertaining stories about this very rich part of the world that we're from. I've done that in the past I found that if you make films with complex, interesting, charismatic, funny characters that you can laugh with and cry with and understand and share that with the world, that's the best way to do that. So I've done that in the US, and I've done that in the Middle East with the film Startup.com, Control Room, and most recently The Square, which focused on some young revolutionaries in Egypt who went down to the square in 2011 and continued fighting to change the country. We followed them for 3 years. The film went on to be nominated for an Academy Award. We didn't win, but it was a film that was released widely across the Arab world in Egypt. Now, we're working on a couple of things. We're working on a film, animation film with Angelina Jolie called The Breadwinner, which is about a young Muslim girl who is in Afghanistan. It's a cartoon. She cuts her hair. She goes to save her father from prison. And it's to get, to kids, basically, the story of a young Muslim, spunky, funny girl. Sorry? Yeah, it's like Mulan. This is what partnership is about. Somebody constantly correcting you. Why don't you go ahead and... Okay. So we're working on that. We're working on another project with Angelina about four refugee films, basically talking about the opportunity that refugees represent. And we're also working on a fiction project, which is a completely new sort of a leap of faith for us. We're watching right now on US television screens series like Homeland and Tyrant, and there's no Arab voices behind the content about the world that is being shown all across the Western world. And so this is where we're going to appeal to you to tell us your stories about what's really happening. Because imagine The Godfather. I mean, I don't know if The Godfather is the best example, but imagine The Godfather being created with no Italian-American voices. Imagine any of the Holocaust films being created without any Jewish-American voices. So we're working actually with some very top people in television in the United States to create a series which is basically like Traffic. Traffic was about the war on drugs, but the sort of traffic of the war on terror, and really sort of taking a look into that and creating a series, which is, it's a long process, but that's what's exciting us now, because that's how we see, that's the best way to get into the hearts and minds of people around the world, to really understand the complexity of the world that we come from.
So I want to come back to this, both the co-creation that we've already seen just there, but also this issue of getting into people's hearts and minds. For me, the idea of The Godfather set in Lebanon that's going to be box office. I can tell you now. And you've got plenty of Godfathers out there already. It's a documentary rather than a film, probably. Nadine, what's inspiring you? What's getting you up at the moment?
At the moment, I'm writing my next film, and it's about. I've always seen a lot of films talking about women's rights, but I've never seen a film talking about children's rights in their own words, in their way of seeing what justice is, and it's going to be about a boy who's going to claim his rights. I'm still in the process of writing it. We're writing it together, Khalid and I, and I hope I'm going to be able to shoot next after I deliver. Yeah.
You have another new release first.
Yeah, I have another new release first.
And how does that process work, Khalid? When you're writing together, as well as dealing with parenthood, which I know full well takes up a lot of my time. How does that all work?
I think it works very naturally for us. I mean, it doesn't. It's not always easy, that's for sure. I'm sure you know that also. But for us, it works very, very naturally. Especially that Khalid is always there when the idea of the film is born. So because we write from home, so even Walid, our son, is there also. We write from home, so it's all mixed up. Our personal life is mixed up with our work. There's always somebody around from the film crew. The writers are there. So the work happens very naturally, and even the music is born very naturally because it's born whenever the idea of the film is born. And of course, it's not always easy because you know how it is. Like Khalid says,
it's not always easy to go to sleep at night with the director of your movie. And the whole day she's a director, and at night she still want to be the director. So, but it's very interesting at home. I mean, we live in a constant artistic environment where creativity is always there, and this makes things sometimes easy and sometimes not. But for me, as a composer, as a music composer on a movie, it's very creative for me to be at the beginning of the process, So when the film is written, I'm there, because usually in the industry, they as a composer, they send you the film which is already shot, and you have to adapt the music on the images. In my case, I just put the music on ideas, and ideas are always much more interesting than images for me as a musician, because it's something that is. I mean, my imagination is much more fertile with a text than with an image. So that's it. But I mean, the frontier between work and personal relation is not always very clear.
Yeah. Do you ever switch off the creative process? I mean, if you're in this atmosphere of constant creativity, do you ever have to say, okay, we're going to have an hour now where we don't talk about the next film?
It's hard.
It's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah,
I mean,
because sometimes we fight over something artistic. I mean, in the editing room, we fight over a music or an image, and then we have to go home and be normal. So
it's difficult. I mean, but at the same time, it's amazing to be talking about this over dinner instead of, I don't know, talking about the weather or whatever. It's amazing to be talking about the creative process and about what's happening in the world, about how what we are doing can impact our society. It's amazing to be sharing this at home too the whole time. And I'm hoping that while Walid is sitting with us and, you know, my future daughter, they're going to be picking up, you know, whatever we are talking and whatever, and it's going to impact their life in a way. And it's amazing. I mean, I'm happy working and living this at the same time.
But if you want to talk about women's rights in the Arab world, I mean, we are not the right example.
How about you, Karim? I mean, how does it work for you? Is it always a creative process, or are you able to separate your lives from the work?
I think it's very similar to what they're saying, and I can feel Khalid's frustration living with the director. You know, she's amazing, but it's like sometimes it can be difficult. But I think what's fascinating is that you create this environment where you're really able to share everything. You know, there's no boundaries, which can be overwhelming, but I think it helps your relationship grow a lot. And I think that it's an interesting, you know, it's a very full way to live in a way. You know, you're really with someone who understands all your different sides. And like they were saying, if you get into an argument, there's no time to really have that kind of space to argue, because your work steps in. So it's like your work and your personal are constantly surfing and intersecting with each other in this kind of these waves of life, which can be quite fascinating.
See, I mean, I was thinking about dedicating this book I'm trying to write at the moment and saying, I dedicate it to my wife for helping me find time to write, and to my kids for always stopping me writing. Do you find, I mean, you're recently new parents, how has having a family impacted on the space that you have for creativity?
It's cliche, but having a child really changes your view. I mean, I think that watching, for example, what's happening with the refugees around the world, intellectually I always, really felt for what was happening, but now I physically feel for what's happening to some of these kids, you know. So I think it influences everything that you're doing.
And it shapes the stories you want to tell. I mean, it's like, in a way, you know, we inherited a certain story of the Middle East, for example, and we have been, you know, we've witnessed as whole generations, and, you know, one gentleman called the Arab Spring a failure, and the biggest thing that destabilized the region. I think the war in Iraq definitely destabilized the region much more than the so-called failed Arab Spring, which I think is going to continue, and it's too early to judge right now as a failure. But I think that story, to me, you know, is important, because it's a story of an entire generation, like so many speakers said, of over 60% young people trying to reimagine the future, trying to redesign the future, trying to believe that they can be the authors of their own future, something which we lost in the Middle East. This culture of rich storytelling has lost its ability to keep young people inspired and engaged. You know, I mean, and I think that as artists and as people in this space, we're trying to help reimagine the story of the Middle East, because right now we're failing. I mean, that's the honest truth. Daesh is in the storytelling business, and they're selling a much better story than all of us. And until we readjust and find a better way to tell a more beautiful story of hope, a story of hope that's accessible and real, not just one that we imagine but isn't actually accessible, we're going to continue to be behind. And the consequences, as we see, are catastrophic. So I hope for my daughter's sake that we're able to reimagine a story for the youth, for the 60% young people in the Middle East, that is inclusive and can pave a way forward.
See, many of us in diplomacy, particularly when we're trying to use social media, we do see ourselves as directly in competition with Daesh in that space, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or elsewhere. Do you see yourselves as in that direct competition? Do you see yourselves as going toe-to-toe with Daesh for people's hearts and minds, for their attention?
I mean, I was saying earlier, I think we're a little bit small to, be up against Daesh. You know, we're not but I think something like Arab Idol, right, is a better example of something that, is vying for people's attention, because it is much more of a mass, it gets out to a much more of a mass of people. But definitely I feel like, we're in this world of trying to, my hope is to not only be making art, but to be inspiring other people from our region to be making art and to be expressing themselves and to be getting their voices out there. Because I do think that once we have those kinds of environments where you're able to express yourself more freely, that takes away a lot from Daesh and these kinds of influences.
Yeah, I mean, long time before Arab Idol, Kulthum in the 50s and the 60s, much more than Abdel Nasser and much more than the Arab League. I'm sorry, Mr. Amr Moussa. They did more to Arab unity and boundary than all the politicians. Artists were long time ahead of their politicians. The one who created Europe long time before the European Union was Michelangelo, was Mozart, was Victor Hugo. These people, they are the one who created what today is Europe. So during the 50s and 60s, every Arab person in Lebanon, in Syria, in Egypt, used every Thursday night to wait for Kulthum, to listen to her music on the radio, which was live long time before Arab Idol and all these things. Why this? Music, what is music? Music is a brain synchronizer. This is its purpose in our human evolution. And that means that what is a brain synchronizer? It synchronizes brain intellectually and emotionally. That's why nations has anthems. That's why for all people to link themselves emotionally to these nations. So art can't link people. Where politics fail, art can succeed.
And do you, therefore, when you set out to write a piece of music or to create a film, are you seeking to provoke that change? Are you thinking, I want to see this political change, and so I'm going to write this kind of film? Or does the change follow the film? Which comes first?
In my case, I say that change follows the film. Well, I'm seeking to find extraordinary characters that I want to share with the world. When I went down to the square, I wasn't looking to find people that I didn't want to share with the world. I was looking to find people that were inspiring to me, that that made me dream of a better future, of the world, to see a better future. And by bringing these characters together and making a film about them, an audience then is able to dream and see of a better future. But it starts first with the entertainment, it starts first with the character, because without that, you're making sort of didactic activist filmmaking, which is very boring.
Yeah, and I think
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that, You know, I think it goes down to your sense of role models as well. You know, and it's like for me, when I look at great artists, I see a similarity between great artists, great political leaders, and great scientists, because they're all people who refused the choices in front of them and created their own way. They're people who refuse to say, this is the only way I can express myself. I'm going to create my own method. I'm going to create my own way. These are not the two choices, Daesh or Assad. There's another way. I'm going to believe to find another way. The people who are willing to take that bold step and are willing to create the systems that we admire, these are the people that I look up to. And I think that when you look at great artists and great political leaders and great scientists, you find that synergy of people who refuse the binary choices ahead of them and create their own way. They forge their own way. And I think art is very much about forging the space, and sometimes in societies, for self-expression. In the Middle East, where in this politically turbulent time, it's no coincidence that there's so much, there's such a boiling of movements of self-expression happening across the region. You know, that's why you're seeing so much content being created right now. That's also why we're seeing so much content being consumed right now. I mean, Saudi Arabia, for example, has the highest YouTube consumption per capita in anywhere in the world. That's unbelievable. Why is that? Why are people feeling a need to consume content, to create content, to share? I think it's reflective of our times.
Nadine.
Yeah, in my case, I think living in the Middle East in itself becomes a mission, because you live in a world, in a region where nothing right is happening. It's like a doomed region. It's like nobody gets, their rights. It's like the place of injustices. And this ongoing anger makes you want to express yourself. It's as simple as that. It's this anger, anyway, that I think makes us stay in our country. Because there's this ongoing frustration. You feel the need to... For me, it's like a cry for help. It's a scream. When I'm writing a film, it's like I'm expressing... a journalist, maybe when they feel this... when he feels or she feels this frustration, writes an article. A singer writes a song, maybe. I write films because it's really my only way of expressing this anger. And it's really this anger that creates or inspires me in the beginning. It becomes an obsession, and when it becomes an obsession, I start thinking about it the whole time, and all of a sudden, it becomes a film, it becomes a story. And I truly believe that cinema is one of the most non-violent and most powerful non-violent weapons to make a change. Because as Khalid was saying, it does synchronize people's minds at the same time. When you have so many people in the same room watching a film at the same time, having the same emotions at the same time, there's a collective thing happening there. And very rarely there have been very powerful political speeches throughout history, but they're very rare. And when they do exist, you see them, all over the news, all over the internet. They're archived because they make a change. But unfortunately, most of the time, it's not the case. I'm sorry, politicians should start changing their way of impacting the world and giving speeches. They cannot keep reading from papers anymore. They cannot keep saying the same diplomatic things anymore because it doesn't work anymore. We don't listen anymore. We lose interest after 3 minutes. So I think this is where cinema is becoming more and more powerful, because it's also at the same time entertaining. You're watching a film and being entertained at the same time and understanding things about the world and understanding things about different cultures. So I think we have to be more and more aware of this responsibility. It is a big responsibility, and I think there's more and more filmmakers that are becoming aware of that. If you observe it well, cinema is shifting towards something much more real, much more impactful. It's not anymore about only entertainment. It's entertainment with something else, with a further step.
But does that mean that the frustration that you speak about from being in that very specific Lebanese context or Middle East context, or the situation that you've been through with Tahrir in Egypt, does that mean that you are better artists, better filmmakers and musicians because you're in the Middle East at the moment, even with all those frustrations? Then if you were based in Oslo at the moment, would you be making such powerful films?
Can I?
Khaled.
I mean, for me, this is like Darwinism. When you're in a hostile environment, or you become better, or you die. And for us in Lebanon, it's like we're living in Pompeii. In Pompeii, 2,000 years ago, and there is a Vesuvio next to us who's going to explode. And we know we have this urge of living. So you start valuing things much more. For an artist today that is living in Europe, what is his main question about life? The main issue is solitude. I mean, and all the art in Europe now revolve around this thing: solitude, individualism. We are still facing big questions. The most interesting stories were written in the gulags, and wherever you have an artist facing big question about life, like injustice, like liberty, like death, art become more interesting. That's why today artists from what we call the South are the one who are telling the most interesting stories. I mean, to have oil, you have to smash an olive, and so we are the one who are being smashed today. So we chose to live in this region because we have much more things to say until now.
I think I agree with what Khaled's saying. I mean, the environment definitely plays a role in the kind of art that you create that way, and I think that storytelling is the oldest method of communication we have. We've been telling stories since the beginning of time. Even if we look at our books, if we look at our religion, it's all based on the principle of storytelling. Cinema is one of the strongest methods of telling story. But the concept of story is as old as man. We've been, you come to Egypt, it's on our walls. People have been drawing on the walls for thousands of years trying to tell a story. And I think that every generation's challenge is to try and reimagine that story. Because when the story of a society fails, when the story of a government and its people fail, the people in that society, especially the creative community, try to reimagine that story. And they do it through film. They also do it through trying to reimagine the symbols in that society. Speaking from Egypt, we lived for 5,000 years with one symbol, which was the symbol of the pyramid. That was the symbol of power, a symbol of hierarchy, where there were some people on top and the majority of the country was on the bottom. And for the first time in 5,000 years, that symbol was challenged in Tahrir Square, where for the first time it was a flat image. A sea of people became the new symbol of power in Egypt. It was no longer a pyramid, it was a flat image. And that is the image that inspired the world, and inspired squares not just in Egypt, but around the Middle East and around the world. When people started gathering in squares in solidarity, something was happening. People are trying to react to that and say, we too believe in a different story. We too believe that we have the right to be authors of our future. I think the majority of people in the Arab world are artists, are storytellers, and have a story that deserves to be told and needs to be told. And I think that it's our responsibility as artists and as politicians and as civil servants to create the space for that. Because our failure to embrace this electric current of people trying to forge their way, trying to tell a story, trying to reimagine, our failure to do that will doom us. Because it will lead to young population being susceptible to people like Daesh. It will lead to Western populations writing our story for us, which we've lived through for over 100 years of colonial rules and borders that were being drawn for us, like Sykes-Picot. There's a reason why when Daesh crossed from Syria into Iraq, the first thing they tweeted was, "Here marks the end of Sykes-Picot." That's what they wrote on Twitter.
So this is a much bigger story than just a few that's happening here. Daesh is representing now a post-colonial dream. And it's filling a void based off of our failures to reimagine a future for the youth. And we can't blame anybody but ourselves. And that's the reality. And as long as we're weak, our story will be told for us by the Daeshes of the world and also by the foreign powers of the world.
In 4 years as ambassador in Beirut, every time I did a session like this, I timed to see how long it was before Sykes-Picot got mentioned. And we did 35 minutes a day. It's always good to remind the Brits that it's all our fault, really. You made a very powerful case that actually I feel governments in the region should also be listening to for why giving the space for your sorts of voices is actually in line with the effort to establish security and take on the more extremist narrative. What's getting in the way of that?
You're running into roadblocks all the time. I mean, but you work to make it work. You figure out humorous ways to do things. But even sometimes that does. I mean, look at Bassem Youssef's show. That's been completely cancelled. He was so popular around the Middle East as the first person to use satire to talk about our situation. So there are obstacles. My friend Naif Matawa from Kuwait created the 99s, which was a cartoon, and he's had death threats against him. So it's a difficult environment to work in. But I think that it is imperative that we give as much support to artists as possible, and for leadership to say, I'm in a position of strength. I don't have to agree with what this content is, but I should allow it to exist. That doesn't mean that I agree with it.
Nadine, do you find, in that atmosphere of hostility often to the work, do you find that you self-censor in response to that? Do you find that you're forced to adapt the content?
I think, unfortunately, I don't know if it's a positive point or a negative point, but I think self-censorship became a part of my personality because I live in the Middle East and because there is so much pressure that comes from the community you live in. We live in communities. We don't live, within families, within communities. Other people's judgment is very heavy. So I think you grow up, ever since we're children, we grow up with the word aib, with this finger pointed at us. Aib, it means it's a shame. It's a shame to do this or that. So you grow up and you start developing this self-centered personality. And I learned how to do this very quickly. And I learned how to tell and to say whatever I wanted to say, but in a in a tricky way. I use humor in my films to trick my way into saying things that I'm not allowed to say. So sometimes it's very hard because there's a contradiction between who you really are and who you allow yourself to be, because of the pressure of the society and the family. And I think it's the same for a lot of people. I cannot say that I'm completely oblivious of what people say about me or what people think of me. I didn't develop this wisdom to be able to face it. Sometimes things hurt, yeah. Sometimes when people are very, very, negative or towards what I'm doing, I don't have the tools yet to protect myself from it. But I'm learning to live with it. I cannot. If I want to continue, I cannot be absorbed by it. But because it can absorb you very quickly. People can be very mean. I don't know why it's this personality. I don't know if it's only in Lebanon or in the whole Middle East. I cannot say. But out of my own experience, there's a certain how do you say mauvaise foi?
Bad faith.
Bad faith. I don't know why. Maybe because sometimes coming from this region, you feel like people feel like you can't do anything, you can't achieve anything. So when you do achieve something, there must be something wrong with you. You must have done something politically incorrect to achieve something because you come from this region. You know, ever since we are kids, living in Lebanon at school, the teacher used to show us the map of the world and say, you see this dot on the map? This is Lebanon. So you grow up thinking you're too small to achieve anything. You're too small to do anything. And then when you do achieve something, people have this doubt about how come you did achieve something? How come the 2 films we've done are, seen worldwide or sold worldwide? They went to many festivals. How come this? There must be something politically incorrect with what they're doing.
I think, if I could say, I think it comes from something about like coming from cultures of, not cultures, but when you grow up where there's corruption, or you grow up in a society which has low self-esteem. Like you can't get forward without knowing this person or that person, And we experienced that with the Square. The Square was, 30 people working on a crew, working very hard for 3 years every day, and there was no secrets about it. That's what we did. And because we were nominated for an Oscar, you get, it's CIA funded, and it's this, and it's that, and it's the other. And I think that happens a lot with success in our region, unfortunately, because people don't understand that success can come from hard work.
But why is that? Because we've lost our heroes. We don't have heroes anymore. It comes back to storytelling. I'm sorry. When you're a child, your concept of the world is a story. The story your parents tell you, the story the world around you tells you, the story you learn at school. And the basic story that we've known through the beginning of time is the hero's journey. That's the most simple story that we all tell ourselves. And each culture around the world has its version of the hero's journey. Unfortunately, the reality in the current Arab street is we don't see any heroes. The heroes we have to go back to. This is why the message not to keep bringing up Daesh is working. They're going back 1,400 years to try to create a reality, because the reality around us is not providing a way of heroics. So we have to ask ourselves, why have we failed to provide modern-day heroes? Where are the heroes of today? And why were they not shining? And when is our culture going to realize the importance of doing so? We come from such a rich culture, and I think this is what saddens us as people from this world. And I just want to say, I think it's important that the people in this room and people in this conference who work in government remember that when we look at the different chapters of history, one of the main things that always stays through regimes is their cultural achievements. So powers come and go, but their cultural achievements and monuments stay as memories of the greatness that they accomplished. So I think it's a learning test of all of this incredible access to wealth that we have in this region, to really remember that so much of what's remembered in history is your cultural contribution. So I think we should ask ourselves, what is our cultural contribution going to be looked at of the last 10 years, of the last 50 years in the Middle East? What have we left behind? And what have we contributed to the world?
Yeah. I think that's a very good note. I'm getting the time's up signal here, and I've been told that if I go on much longer, I get electrocuted. So I just want to make sure that's okay. Can we just conclude? What I'd love to, just picking up on Karim's point, Brilliant. Okay. We've had a respite. Turn the current off.
Captain suspense. 10 more.
We've touched on this a bit. Can the Middle East go back to that period that Khaled was talking about earlier on? Can it become a cultural superpower again? Can it start to tell these heroic stories? Can it start to create the content that the rest of the world watches? I'd like to put that to everyone.
Of course, everything starts with education, but unfortunately, until now, all the Arab world, publish books as much as Greece. I'm talking from Morocco to Iraq. 300 million people publishing book as much as the worst country in Europe in publishing. So we have to work on this field. The more we read, the more we can reach a state where we can produce interesting things for humanity. Because now we're competing with humanity. I mean, it's not just about us. My neighbor is the planet now today. So, and just to emphasize on what he was saying about no one's remember who was ruling Germany when Jean-Sébastien Bach was there. No one remember who was ruling Italy when Leonardo da Vinci was there. So art is the most important thing in any civilization. So I mean, help and produce art. This is the one of the main purposes that people have to work on.
And I feel strongly this point that we touched on earlier about tech and digital and the potential that gives to this region. I think the region missed out on 200 years of development because it smashed up the printing press. And it can't make the same mistake with the internet now. Yeah. If you try and close down the internet, then you're closing off all that creativity. It will spring up. You can't switch it off completely.
You can't.
But you're suppressing an important amount of your region's potential.
No, absolutely. And I think that's an important... It's the new generation.
Rahida wanted the new generation to be part of the panel, so here she is.
She's gorgeous.
Did you not have kids at the other sessions?
So, no, I think when I do panels in the United States, I always criticize the United States. But when I come to the Middle East, I criticize the Middle East. So I feel like I have to share both sides and the criticism. But I think when we look at the state of the Middle East, of course, foreign intervention has led to major problems and colonial legacy and all that. But we also have to recognize that when we look at our culture and history and its greatness, there was a period where our religion and our identity went hand in hand with science and art and culture, and something happened. There was a moment that something happened where all of a sudden we got scared of science. And I think that, like what you're saying, we have to learn from that mistake and see how much that's cost us, and now not repeat the same mistake with the new technologies that are there, with the internet, and understand that the internet, its biggest, I think one of the reasons why the internet is so incredibly popular in its usage in the Middle East is because of its role in connecting people, in allowing people to share stories and communicate. I think that's why the internet is so popular, and that's why you have the highest consumption of YouTube per capita in the world in Saudi Arabia. Why is that? I mean, that's a strange statistic, but that's true. So I think that these statistics show that people in our region are dying to communicate with one another. They're dying to break free and tell stories and relate and express themselves. And if we don't, do that, we get to a dangerous situation. I mean, look, Hitler didn't get into art school. And you saw what happened. So, I mean,
so you have to support us.
So there's nothing more dangerous than a failed artist.
Yeah. Now, I completely, this issue of connectivity, I just want to plug one other project which I'm involved in at the moment, is working with Facebook to connect the refugee camps. Because they've done, much smarter people than me have done the research that says for every 10 people you connect to the internet, one will be lifted out of poverty. There's a direct relationship between the two.
And the refugee camps are a critical thing that this group needs to think of as well, because that's another legacy that's happening and a ticking time bomb. I mean, the Taliban's, which has been one of the harshest philosophies we've seen, a lot of their philosophy came from Afghan refugee camps in Pakistan. Okay, these were schools that a lot of the madrasas had started in Pakistan in refugee camps, and they produced one of the harshest expressions of Islam that we've seen today. What's going to happen in the Syrian refugee camps? What are you supposed to think of as a young Syrian kid today in a refugee camp when you see that the world's abandoned you? And what is that going to produce? And what is going to happen to the 14 million potential refugees in Yemen next year if we don't act? So I think we have to start thinking about what all of this is going to cost us down the line, and what kind of philosophy is going to be bred from these very harsh environments that we're leaving behind. And so we should embrace the refugee camps and really use them as an opportunity to provide education for people, to see that this is the generation of people that will come back and hopefully rebuild the country until when the political situation is sorted.
Do you feel as positive, Nadine, about the future of the cultural fabric of the Middle East?
I do feel positive because it's not anymore about the means. I mean, you can make films with your phone. You can make you don't. What's been lacking until now is people who believe in this industry and who invest in this industry in order to make money. It's not the case anymore. I mean, you don't need big investors to make a film. You can make a film with your phone. So the fact that everything that's happening in the whole, like I said before, Middle East is so frustrating that people are putting out there their anger and they're expressing themselves, whether through music or cinema or... I do believe that I'm very positive, and I do believe that it will... I'm not sure we're going to become a superpower because we still have a lot to work on, and I think we still have a lot... we have a lot of work to do on our, education, perspective, vision of the world. This is something different, and I do think we have a lot of... we lack a lot of things in this field, but when it comes to cinema, I think because of the situation, more and more people are expressing themselves, maybe not in the right way sometimes, but it's important that they are able to express themselves. And so I'm, more or less positive.
Jehane, how do you feel?
I mean, the people that I know that are artists across this region, it's as you described. It's an obsession. There's not much you can do to stop them. I mean, and I guess to bring it back to why we've married people in our field, it's a little bit crazy. I mean, who goes and sits in a square for 3 years in order to maybe make a film that will maybe come out? So you have to have somebody that's there to support this dream or this vision and your madness. So, the people that I know, I mean, I was giving a couple of examples, and here in Abu Dhabi, another friend of mine is recreating Arabic Sesame Street and getting that out to the world. And so there are people that are really trying to use film and music and content to educate and to inspire and to create a new dream. And those people are out there, and we all know them. And they're people that aren't going to stop, and they're going to continue to inspire other people. So I'm positive about this, the next generation. And I'm definitely, being in Egypt the last 3 years, there were a lot of failures. But to see some of the artists that have come out of the last few years and the Arab Spring is quite inspiring.
I mean, all it takes is really having the courage to show more and more reality, to show more and more... I mean, like I said, there's a shift in cinema. It's not anymore about just telling a story with actors that are inaccessible, and you go out of the theater, you forget about it. It's more about telling stories of people people you identify with, and it's not a fiction anymore. It's like fiction and reality are starting to mix. And like you said before, I mean, are we competing with Daesh? I think it's very easy to compete with Daesh. All you need to know to do is kill somebody live, and then that's it. I mean, it's easy to compete. It's not what they are doing is not really. It's playing on the sensational. And look at what's happening with what they are doing. Because it's reality. I mean, I'm not saying we should do that, but I'm saying that when you start having the courage to do real things, to talk about real stuff, it's becoming more and more powerful and more impactful on society.
And I think also that just one thing is that we should also see one of the themes of this conference has been cooperation and pan-Arab cooperation and bringing back the role of the Arab League and other types of cooperation tools. If we look in the golden era of Arabic cinema in the 1940s in Egypt, the classic black and white movies that we all love, so many of the movies that you see were a collection of people from all over the Middle East. You know, you had Omar al-Sharif, you know, coming from Lebanon. You had people coming from all over the place. You had Shadia, you had Naguib Rahani, you had all these people. No one remembered what their identity was because they were all united in their different, you know, in their love for the creation of culture. And it really united us. And you had these incredible pieces, like what Khaled was saying with Kulthum, that resonated from Morocco to Baghdad. So we should remember that culture united us, and culture brought us together and broke us of our tribal lenses that sometimes make it difficult to click together, and allowed us to create a space to celebrate. So let's reinvent that, and let's find what are the modern ways of celebrating our shared Arab identity.
Well, that sounds like a very positive note to end on. I want to just, I said at the beginning something about the power of visuals, and I think if we're talking about the potential of the next generation, everyone should take a look at this smile down here. It's absolutely extraordinary, demonstrating the visual power of the next generation, and holding the microphone, stealing the microphone from our generation, and saying, "Let me have a try at doing it even better."
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, can I say one last thing? Am I allowed? One thing this has reminded me is, you know, if we're talking about this crossover between art and politics, one thing I know for certain is that I won't be making a film anytime soon, and Khaled knows my musical ability and knows I won't be making any music anytime soon. But I do think what today's session has demonstrated ever more clearly is the need for artists like this, talents like this, to be moving towards that political space, and to be given that freedom and that space to articulate themselves, and to articulate what I feel is an extraordinarily powerful and strong vision of the future of the Middle East. So thank you to the four of you.
Yes, thank you so much. I just want to say I appreciate everyone's presence at this summit. Honestly, I can't tell you individually each and every one of you, but I just want to say a personal word about how much I love those four people and their little ones, Walid and Noor, and they are family to me, really, because there is history of children and our children together. And the fact that they traveled with a baby, with a 4 or 5 months old baby from Los Angeles, and Nadine, that you 7 months pregnant with Walid together, and Khaled, how much support you have given us for this, how inspiring you are. I just want to tell you, you reminded me when I used to bring Thalia to these conferences and people looked very weirdly at me. So I'm sure they're not looking weirdly at you at all, because you really make a difference, and with love, lots of thanks, with lots of love for you. Thank you.
Thank you.